Keep your eyes on the road, your hands on the wheel.
This happened several years back. The night was darker than usual, and I was making my way along a desolate stretch of highway, far away from city lights. The only sources of light being my headlights cutting through the night. There were no stars that night, and barely any moon due to the clouds. As I approached a particularly remote section of the highway, sipping my coffee and listening to a podcast, something caught my eye. A figure, barely discernible in the weak glow of my headlights, was walking along the edge of the road. It appeared to be a woman in a dress totally not suited to the season or predicament. She was also barefoot. My heart skipped a beat. This was the last place I'd expected a pedestrian to be, especially at this late hour, so far away from anything even close to civilization. I couldn't help but to feel apprehension and a sense of responsibility. It wasn't safe for anyone to be walking along this pitch-black highway. And why would anyone be? For sure, they must need some kind of help. I signaled and pulled my truck to a halt on the shoulder. I climbed out of the cabin. The cold night air was biting. As I approached the spot where I'd seen the figure, a strange chill crept down my spine. There was no one there. I scanned the area with my flashlight, but the road was empty, and the only sounds were the distant hum of the engine and the chirping of crickets. What the hell was going on? I couldn't have imagined the figure. It had been so distinct. I called out into the darkness, asking if anyone needed assistance, but there was no response, only an eerie silence that hung heavily in the air. Feeling uneasy, I returned to my truck and waited in it, looking around, trying to decide what to do before just continuing down the highway. Who was that woman? And where had she gone so suddenly? When I stopped at a nearby truck stop to take a break, I decided to ask the waitress in the diner there about the area. With a knowing look, she told me the story of a woman who had met her tragic end in a traffic accident on that very stretch of highway years ago. Her restless spirit was said to appear to travelers at night from time to time, though she herself had never seen her. Not the only strange thing that has happened to me out on the open road, but definitely the creepiest.
I'm not a trucker myself, but my uncle is. We were chatting at a family barbecue recently. He's a bit of a storyteller when he drinks, so I asked him if he had any creepy things happen while driving, since I love listening to trucker stories. He told me this story, and I asked if I could write it down and share it. This is written down from memory, not long after he told me, so it's basically his words. Here goes. I've seen plenty of strange and creepy things during my years as a long-haul trucker. Some you wouldn't even believe. Hell, I don't even believe most of them, and put them down as hallucinations from sleep deprivation. But the creepiest for me wasn't some ghost on the side of the road. It wasn't some possible cryptid running along my truck. It was another human. Well, physically anyway. I was driving on a lonely, desolate stretch of highway. It was a moonless night. All I had with me for company was my engine's hum and the long road ahead. It was really dark outside, and the only light was from the truck's headlights cutting through the night. I'd been driving for about 2 hours in this stage. I turned a corner and my headlight showed something strange up ahead. There was a person hunched over in the middle of the road. I quickly hit the brakes, making my truck screech to a stop. My heart was racing as I looked through the windshield, trying to understand what was going on. It was a man, hunched over something on the road. He looked messy and with wet and dirty clothes. What caught my eyes were he was tearing at what seemed to be an animal that was hit by a car. My headlights showed all the horrible details. The man was tearing into a deer's stomach that was still laying still in the ground. It was obviously roadkill, and he was tearing into it with his hands and teeth, and bringing the still dripping meat to his mouth and eating it. His hands and face were covered with dark, wet stains. The smell was awful, like death was right there. "What the?" was all I managed to get out before my gag reflex kicked in. I was really scared and grossed out. Like, what kind of person does this? Was he a threat? Was he all there mentally? Not knowing what else to do, I grabbed my phone to call 911. The person on the other end sounded like they didn't believe me at first, but concerned when it became more apparent that I was telling the truth. They said help was coming and told me to stay in my truck. While I waited, I couldn't stop looking at the man. He just kept eating, not noticing the police sirens coming closer. It felt like forever, minutes dragging on, and I can't even begin to describe how sick and unnerved I felt. When the police got there, they went up to the man, and it was like he suddenly woke up from a weird trance. They took him away and asked me a lot of questions about what I had seen. They let me go after that, and I had no idea what had happened to the man. I never got a follow-up. I'm guessing he had some kind of mental problem, but who really knows? After that, I kept driving, but I couldn't forget that strange and creepy moment. The sight of the flesh and the gore was in my head for some time after. In fact, I couldn't stand the sight of raw meat for a while, but thankfully it had passed. While my life was never in danger, it still was one of the scariest things I've ever seen. I hope the man got the help he clearly needed in the end.
As an interstate truck driver with over 2 decades of experience under my belt, I thought I had seen it all, the long stretches of road between the main cities of Australia. But one fateful night, as I traversed the desolate long stretch between Adelaide and Perth, I encountered something that defied all logic, and I still can't come to terms with to this day. The night was clear, the sky dark and unending. The stars glimmered brilliantly overhead. You never truly appreciate how many stars there are until you see the night sky clear from any city. As my truck rumbled along the lonely highway, I noticed a set of oddly colored lights in the sky, bigger and brighter than the rest. At first, I dismissed them as planes or satellites, but as I carried on, the lights seemed to draw closer, matching the speed and trajectory of my truck. A pang of anxiety hit me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were following me. Minutes felt like hours as the lights maintained their relentless pursuit. My heart raced, and a sense of dread settled in the pit of my stomach. There was no way of escaping them, and I was already putting myself at risk driving under such conditions with the heavy load I was transporting. So I pulled over to the side of the highway. I reached for my radio, intending to call for help or report the strange phenomenon. But all that came through was aggressive static. That's the best way I can describe it anyway. The lights continued their eerie dance in the night sky, their glow flickering and pulsating in some kind of rhythm. The minutes crawled by as I struggled to comprehend what I was seeing. Were these lights a mere illusion, or had I been a witness to something extraterrestrial? Eventually the lights faded into the distance, leaving me in the dark expanse of the open road once more. Then I noticed something even more unsettling. The clock displayed on my dashboard read 3:42 a.m. The last time I had looked at it, it had said 12:05 a.m. Hours had seemingly vanished in what seemed like no more than 10 minutes. My memory was a haze, and I couldn't recall anything specific during that missing time. Hell, I couldn't even recall time being missing. I took some time to get my nerves back under control. I was shaking like a leaf after such a weird encounter, and was having a hard time distinguishing my imagination from reality. Eventually the adrenaline crashed, and I had a quick nap for safety. I didn't even care if it was going to throw my schedule out. For the rest of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease and a sense of vulnerability, unsure what exactly had happened, but knowing it was anything but normal. When I reached my destination, I relayed my experience to another trucker there who was taking a short break before heading back out. He told me that many others had also had very similar experiences, and that I did the right thing to pull over like that. As a seasoned trucker, I have faced countless challenges on the road. But that night's encounter I just can't explain. The lights and the missing time will always haunt my memory and serve as a reminder that the unexplained lurks in the vast, open expanses of the Australian highways.
This is the story of the scariest thing that's ever happened to me while on the road. Maybe not as scary as some of the stories you may hear, but it certainly shook me up, and was a situation I've never heard from any other drivers. Here goes. It was a warm summer night. It wasn't super hot, so I had my windows down enjoying the cool night breeze. The road stretched long and seemed to never end as I drove through the night. I'm a long-distance trucker who drives a lot, so I'm more than used to the quiet and being alone on the road. But this night with the moon low in the sky just felt different, as I was on edge without knowing why. I'd been driving for a good couple hours, outside was dark, and my headlights were the only thing cutting through the night. As I went around a curve in the road, I noticed a tiny bit of movement in my side mirror. I squinted trying to figure out what I was seeing. There, holding onto the side of my trailer, was a dark figure. My heart raced as I tried to understand what I was seeing. I hadn't stopped for anyone, and I was sure no one got on while I was parked before. Panic hit me when I realized that there was someone on my truck who wasn't supposed to be there. I grabbed my radio, my voice shaking as I called for help from the nearest police. The person on the other end said help was coming and I should stay in my truck. I was shaken and confused, not knowing what to do. I had no idea what this person's intentions were, or if they had a weapon or not to mention the extreme risk in their own injury if they fell. If that happened, I would feel somewhat responsible. The person clung onto the side of my trailer, a dark shape against the black night. I couldn't see their face, but I felt their presence, making the highway feel even more uneasy. With every mile, my fear grew, and I watched with dread as they got closer to the cabin. Then thankfully saw the flashing red and blue approaching. When the police sirens got louder, the person seemed to realize that they were coming for them. Suddenly, they climbed onto the roof of my trailer, vanishing from my sight. I was terrified and helpless just watching. The police came fast, instructing me to pull over slowly and telling me to stay inside. They surrounded my truck, and I could only watch as they climbed onto my trailer, ready for anything, trying to find the mystery person. Time dragged on, and tension heavy in the air. Finally, they caught the person. It was a messy and scared-looking person who had hitched a ride without me knowing. I didn't know why they did it, but it was clear to me we were both in big danger. They didn't have any weapons on them, and it didn't seem that their intentions for me were bad or anything. As the police took the person away from my truck, I let out a sigh of relief, thankful to be safe from that terrifying experience. It was a reminder of how a dark highway can hold unexpected dangers, hopefully for my stowaway too.
Working as a truck driver, I've had my fair share of weird and spooky experiences, like randomly smelling plumeria, or a large piece of white fabric hanging on a tree. However, nothing is as terrifying compared to the particular experience I'm about to share with you. I've been working as a truck driver for over 10 years. Never in that 10 years I was in a situation where I was truly scared for my life, until 2 months ago. I usually start my drive around 8:30 p.m, right when the traffic heading out from Kuala Lumpur City eases. My trip that night was a fairly short one. I was doing delivery and pickup in a city named Kuantan that was only around 3 hours away from Kuala Lumpur. My journey to Kuantan was smooth as can be. I arrived just before midnight. The staff were already waiting for me at the drop-off bay. I've been doing deliveries for the factory for so long that I developed friendship with the night staff. Coffee? Azman, the supervisor, said to me as soon as I got off my truck. In his hand was a hot cup of coffee, You're a lifesaver, man. I smiled at Osman as I took the cup from his hand. We had small talk about life and work as we unloaded the truck. Nothing was out of the ordinary until one of the new staff opened his big mouth. So, are you going back to Kuala Lumpur right after this? His question started off innocent. No, I have to pick up at another location, I answered, unsuspecting of what he was going to say next. You were taking the Karak Expressway, right? From the tone of his voice, I knew what he was about to say next was not going to be good. Karak Expressway is famous for being haunted, despite being one of the busiest expressways in Peninsular Malaysia. From the legendary yellow Volkswagen, to the haunted R&R spot at Genting Sempa, to the accident that shook the country in the 1990s when a tour bus collided with a Federal Reserve unit vehicle and about 10 civilian cars. As many as 17 people were killed, and since then, there have been many stories about the ghosts of the victims wandering around the collision area. You better not, Osman warned. Everyone knows speaking about supernatural things late at night is never a good thing. Still, curiosity got the best of him. I just want to know if you ever met the infamous yellow Volkswagen. That's just urban legend. I've been doing this for about a decade and nothing like that has ever happened. People are scarier. This one time, a group of people tried to mug me. I proceeded to tell him about the time I almost got robbed on a quiet road at night. That surely distracted him from his original question. It took less than an hour to unload my truck. Without wasting much time, I made my way to the pickup location. The load was not nearly as much as my drop-off, so by 1:30 a.m. I was already making my way back to Kuala Lumpur. I could not be happier. The trip went so smoothly that I was ahead of schedule. On my way back, the road was deserted. Every now and then, another vehicle would pass by my truck. The streetlights dimly illuminate the road. Thick rain clouds were blocking the moon, making the night darker. The cold and dense air entered my truck from my open window, creating my perfect setting for a good slumber. I reached out to the radio and increased the volume. I knew the loud music will keep me from getting sleepy. It's a trait of mine I learned soon after working as a truck driver. Minutes after I got to the Karak Expressway, raindrops started hitting my windshield. Only then I rolled my window up and turned on the air conditioner. The rain picked up soon after and limited my vision, so I started to slow down. That's when I realized that my truck was the only vehicle on the road. An eerie feeling crept into my heart. It was not rare for me to be in this situation, but still, I could not shake off the bad feeling. Out of nowhere, fog filled the air. That's when I saw it. 2 faintly glowing red dots ahead of me. As you can tell, they were the taillights of another vehicle. I could not see the vehicle due to the rain and fog. I could just see the taillights that were getting closer and closer by the second. Slowly, my headlights reached the vehicle in front of me. The color yellow started to bleed from behind the darkness. It didn't take me long to realize the make of the car. It was a Volkswagen Beetle. You would have thought that finally seeing another vehicle on the road with me would ease the eerie feeling I had. On the contrary, my mind snapped onto the question Osman's new staff asked me hours ago. The heavy feeling I had in my heart sent me into a slight panic, but the voice of reason made me chuckle a little. It's just a coincidence, I whispered to myself, trying not to let fear take over me. The yellow Volkswagen Beetle in front of me was driving unbearably slow, prompting me to overtake it. Normally I would have lasted a bit longer driving behind an annoyingly slow vehicle, but the bad feeling I had made me want to get out of there as soon as I could. I turned on my signal, sped up and switched lanes. Because of the height of my truck, the yellow Volkswagen was almost completely in my blind spot. Overtaking the car was too easy. In moments I saw the flickering headlight of the Beetle fade in my rearview mirror. I breathed a sigh of relief, not sure why. Once again I found myself alone on the road. This time I was driving a little faster. Maybe because I was not as focused on my driving, but by the time I noticed it, a vehicle was just about 4 meters in front of my truck, and I was closing the gap faster than what I was comfortable with. Driving a truck as big as mine, even in a perfect condition, would still spell trouble for me to be approaching a vehicle that fast. I carefully step on the brakes to slow my truck just a little so I can switch lanes without swiping the car in front of me. As I stared at the car that came out of nowhere, it hit me. It was another yellow Volkswagen Beetle. At that point, I was starting to freak out. I sped up once more while trying to tell myself it was just a coincidence that I came across a yellow Volkswagen Beetle just minutes after another. I glanced at my rearview mirror. The headlights of the Beetle had already disappeared from my view. When my eyes moved to the road in front of me, I saw the now familiar taillights in front of me. Please be a different car. A different color would be fine. Just be different, I said to whoever was listening. When I got close enough, my heart sank. It was a yellow Volkswagen Beetle. The closer I got, the slower the car got. I quickly switched lanes and sped up. I was already driving faster than what would be considered safe for a truck on a rainy night, but I didn't care. All I was focusing on was outrunning the yellow Volkswagen. Unexpectedly, this time, the yellow Volkswagen matched my speed. No matter how much I accelerated, the Beetle remained next to my truck. It felt like an eternity, but it was probably no more than 5 to 10 seconds at best. The Beetle was starting to slow down, enough that I could see it fully in my side mirror. That was when I saw it, or rather, I didn't see. I didn't see a driver in the driver's seat. The car was empty. There was no driver, no passenger, nobody. I was petrified. I could not look away from the yellow Beetle despite my senses screaming at me to look in front of me, at the road. There was still a part of me that knew if I didn't snap out of it at that moment, it would not end well for me. That I was driving too fast. Still, I could not bring myself to look away. Like I was paralyzed. That was until a loud blaring horn made me jolt. Another trucker, heading to the direction I came from, just honked at me. It is a thing that we do here. Truckers honk when they pass by each other, as a way to say hi and also as a wake-up call, as we often get sleepy, especially on our night runs. The jolt saved my life. When I looked in front of me, I was moving at a dangerous speed and was so close to driving into the road divider. I gathered myself and brought my truck down to a reasonable speed, despite being on the verge of a panic attack. I came down with a fever the next day and was out of commission for a few days. If it was not because I am my family's sole breadwinner and actually like my job, I would have quit being a truck driver.
I've been driving trucks for years. I've seen a lot, but there is one memory that I just can't get out of my head and haunts me to this day. It happened back when I first started doing longer runs, many years back. The night was dark and the thick clouds covering the sky. I'd been driving for 4 hours and the only company I had was the hum of the engine and the radio. The highway seemed to go on forever, through remote, lonely areas. Although I knew my route well, this night felt different, making me uneasy. As I drove into the darkness, my headlights revealed an unnerving sight. A weirdly moving figure emerged from the shadows by the road. My heart raced as it became clear in the truck's headlights. It was a person, or at least it appeared to be. The way they moved was unnatural, a disjointed gait that made me feel sick to my stomach. Their clothing was tattered and filthy, and their head hung low, concealing their face behind unkempt hair. I instinctively slowed down. My initial concern was for their well-being, giving way to the growing sense of dread. This wasn't right. What was someone doing out here in the middle of nowhere, especially in the dead of night? As I approached, I reached for my CB radio, more out of reflex because my mind just couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. But before I could use it, the person abruptly turned and faced my truck, revealing a face twisted in a grotesque, unnatural grin. Their eyes glowed with an eerie light, that sent a shiver down my spine. I hit the brakes, and when I looked again, they were gone, as if they were never there. Terrified and confused, I just drove away. I couldn't get that image out of my head and saw that face every time I closed my eyes for months after. What was that thing on an empty highway that night?
My encounters happened early 2020. Both happened within 2 months. I'm working as a trailer truck driver at one of the container ports in northern Malaysia. I usually work 12-hour shifts. My job is mostly moving the containers from freight trains to blocks within the port. The train station was a short distance from the port. The first incident happened around 3:30 a.m. At that time, my friends and I had just finished moving the goods containers for the time being. There was still some time until the next train arrived, so we decided to take a quick nap. I parked my truck near the train tracks. To my left was the massive flat area where the containers were arranged, waiting for customs inspection, and the train track was to my right. On the other side of the train track was the highway. My friends decided to nap near the office area, which was about 200 meters from where I was. So it was just me and the crane operator, who was around 10 meters away from me. Despite that, I was comfortable, since I am used to it, and also because the area was brightly lit from the streetlight. The particular stretch of highway is famous amongst motorbike street racers, racing illegally during the weekends. Because of this, there have been countless fatal accidents involving them. Even just recently, when I was taking a nap while waiting for the next train to arrive, I was woken up by a horrible crashing sound. An illegal street racer on a motorcycle had crashed into a car, hitting the car from the back. The people in the car were unharmed. However, the racer died at the scene. The authorities had put up a warning sign to warn users that it is a fatal accident area, but it doesn't seem to mean anything to the illegal street racers. The incident I am about to tell happened on a weekend night. Right around midnight, the street racers started to show up. It was busy with the illegal street race for a while. Luckily, nobody got into an accident. As usual, after 3 o'clock in the morning, the highway became dead again. Oddly enough, that night, I didn't feel sleepy at all, so I can confidently say what happened was not a nightmare. I lit up a cigarette and stared into the empty highway as I listened to some songs on my phone. After a while, a motorcyclist riding a Honda EX5 came into view. Unlike the usual scene, this person was riding extra slow, and from the way his body was leaning to the front, it gave me the impression that his motorbike felt heavy, like he was struggling to move due to a heavy load. My heart started beating faster as the motorcyclist got closer. When he was about 20 meters away from where I was parked, I could see someone, or rather something, squatting in the passenger seat of his motorbike. It did not look human at all. Whatever it was, it had a really freakishly long skinny neck and an abnormally long tongue that fell out of his gaping mouth onto the guy's helmet. The tip of the creature's tongue was dangling and flapping away in front of the motorcyclist's face. I was so terrified that I started praying. I had goosebumps all over my body. Until today, I wonder what happened to the guy. Did he take the creature home? Poor guy. The second incident happened just 2 months ago, around the same time, between 3 to 4 o'clock in the morning. Most of the areas at the port are super quiet around this time, except of course in an area where a ship had just docked. However, the rows of goods containers stacked so high, separating one area to another, makes the next area dead quiet, and the shadows from these containers make the areas a lot darker despite the multiple lights installed in each area. That night, I was assigned to unload a ship. After my load was hooked up to my trailer truck, I drove to the designated row where the container will be stored temporarily, waiting for customs inspection. Out of nowhere, a tall black figure appeared just a few meters from my truck. Despite my headlights shining directly on it, all I could see was a pitch black silhouette, and this was not like the tallest living person kind of height. My truck is around 10 feet high, and this black figure was easily 15 feet tall. You may or may not know, trucks, especially as large as the one I drove, could not stop abruptly, so I had no option but to run over whatever creature it was in front of me. I didn't know what I was expecting, but when my truck was supposed to make contact with the figure, it just disappeared into thin air.
Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.